So hello and welcome back to UNIC's conference Spaces of Culture, taking EU cultural relations to the next level. Over the next hour and 15 minutes, we will be in this Synch session and we will take a closer look at how cultural relations can create safe spaces for intercultural dialogue and creativity, instrumental in enhancing cultural rights and freedom of expressions, which are fundamental rights. My name is Matina. I'm a cultural manager and researcher. I am an expert in cultural relations. That's my field of work, let's say, both from a practice and a research point of view. And I'm also part of a team of experts that we are working the last months, and we will be working until October this year on creating a toolkit on fair collaboration in cultural relations on behalf of UNIC. And this is going to be an engaging process. We want to engage with different audiences and people. So perhaps many of you that are here might be involved in this co-creation exercise that we are looking into. So we are lucky today to be with a very great group of people that represent experts both from the policy and the practice field. And we're going to discuss what I told you before, like how can cultural relations contribute to fostering equality and promoting freedom of expressions? How can the strategic approach to cultural relations support the flourishing of cultural sectors worldwide, unlocking the potential of local communities in the same time? I will first ask all our panelists here to briefly introduce themselves, just say a few words so that we know where they are and what they are doing, and then we will enter into the presentations. Annica, we have Annica Floren with us. She's the Deputy Head of Youth, Education and Culture at the DG International Partnerships of the European Commission. Just a few words about yourself, Annica.
Yes, hi everyone. So my name is Annica. I'm from the European Commission, working in a unit that is focusing on youth culture and education, and I'm the acting head of unit. I've been in the unit for around 4 years and working on cultural matters since then. Thank you.
We also have Srirak Plipat with us, who is the Executive Director of Freemuse. Welcome, Srirak. A few words about yourself.
Yes, thank you very much, Matina. It's a pleasure to join the group here for this discussion. I'm Executive Director of Freemuse, and we are an international human rights organization that we monitor artistic freedom or freedom of artistic expression every year. We monitor censorship worldwide in about 90 countries, and after we document cases of censorship and other forms of restriction, then we analyze patterns and publish report, which is known as the state of artistic freedom. Then we do advocacy and campaign for the improvement of freedom of artistic expression.
Lovely. So you are in Oslo right now, and then we travel back to Brussels with Ayoko Mensah from BOZAR, the artistic programmer and advisor at BOZAR.
Yes, good morning. So yes, my name is Ayoko. As you said, I'm an artistic programmer at the Center for Fine Arts in BOZAR, so in Brussels. I'm particularly in charge of the Afropolitan Festival, which is a multidisciplinary festival dedicated to the contemporary artistic African art scenes, but also arts from the African diaspora in Europe. The next edition, actually, the Afropolitan Weekend, will take place from the 9th to the 11th of July. So please, if you're in Brussels, you're welcome. And I also work regularly with an international organization like UNESCO as a cultural expert.
Great. Thank you, Ayoko and Srirak. And then we go to Venuri. Venuri is an artist from Colombo, artist and movement facilitator.
Yeah, hello everyone. Really nice to be here. I'm a performance artist and choreographer from Colombo, and currently I'm right now in Amsterdam. I'm here as a participant of those arts, and I mostly work as a performer, solo performer. Also collaborate with various artists. And I also, of course, when you come from a place like Sri Lanka, you are never one thing. So, of course, we work in the university or curate things as well. Yeah, excited to be here and hear from all of you.
Lovely. Just some practical details before we get into the real content of this Synch session. We encourage all the people that are with us, all the people that are our audience, people that are listening and are interested in this subject matter, to ask your questions. Please use the chat function. And our aim is to address all those questions at the very end, unless there is a question that is very related to clarifying something that has been said that needs immediate clarification, let's say. So we would love your input. Please be with us, and we're looking forward to having a nice conversation also at the end after the interventions of our speakers. We will start with Annica. Annica from, as we said, from the European Commission, the DG International Partnerships. And what, Annica, we would like to know from you is like how the DG INPA's activities are promoting and fostering intercultural dialogue worldwide. How do they work, and how do they make sure that all the activities focus on human rights, freedom of artistic expression? And are there any insights or any lessons learned that you would like to share with us already today? That would be great and very welcome. Thank you, Annica.
Well, thank you, Matina, and thanks again for the invitation to this panel to speak about this issue that is of great importance to the EU. And first of all, I would like to underline that cultural diversity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms are intertwined. So we believe that they are all necessary ingredients for open, tolerant, and respectful societies. So as such, these core principles are integrated in our policy framework for culture that was developed in 2016. We have the policy paper entitled Towards an EU Strategy for International Cultural Relations. And this interconnection is also very much at the center of the 2005 UNESCO Convention for the Protection and Promotion of Cultural Diversity that the EU has signed. So we have seen that the protection and promotion of cultural diversity can contribute to social cohesion, mutual understanding, and this, as we know, is particularly important in fragile and post-conflict settings. So this is why the EU, we are supporting intercultural dialogue generally as a method in EU-funded programs, but we also have a specific intercultural and interfaith dialogue program running. So I would just like to share with you some examples, for instance, from Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. Here we are in conflict settings, and I would like to show you a slide with some photos from the projects so that you can get a better sense of it. So through community arts, young people could get together to do pantomime, take part in music festivals or kite festivals, do painting workshops, and these different activities help to increase mutual understanding and foster peace and reconciliation. So when talking or when asking the young beneficiaries themselves, they felt that the activities helped them to psychologically face what had happened in the conflict and to understand that learning to live together is really necessary for peace. So we have also seen that art is a very powerful tool to bring complex issues to people's attention, such as conflict and displacement, and to promote behavioral changes. On this slide, you see photos from the project Culture at Work Africa, where local cultural actors have displayed incredible creativity to inspire tolerance, peace, and mutual understanding, but also to advocate for human rights. For instance, in refugee camps in Burkina Faso and Niger, dance and music workshops helped create a space for exchange and discovery and to promote the creativity of refugees. So there were also live performances that gave a voice to minorities and vulnerable groups in countries like Democratic Republic of Congo, or domestic workers in Rwanda that supported them in defending their participation in society as citizens with full rights. But cultural actors need democracy and respect for fundamental freedoms to be able to thrive and operate. And cultural ecosystems cannot develop and flourish if the cultural sectors are stricken by censorship and intimidation. And we have seen that happen too often in many places in the world. Cultural diversity cannot exist without freedom of expression and the respect of human rights. And intercultural dialogue and interfaith dialogue cannot take place without safe spaces where fundamental freedoms and rights are respected. So this is evident in places where minorities are silenced, for instance, like in Myanmar, or where cultural differences are exploited by conflicting parties, as we have seen in recent conflicts in the Middle East. So our work to support cultural actors is therefore interlinked with the work we do to promote human rights. So it's important to remember that the guiding policy framework for the EU's action in human rights, it's the EU Action Plan for Human Rights and Democracy that runs from 2020 to 2024, that commits us to protect and promote cultural rights and to make sure that each individual and community can enjoy them. So this is why cultural actors should be supported to advocate for their rights to express themselves. And this is, for instance, what we've seen in a project, Cultural and Creative Hubs in Vietnam, that we are implementing with the British Council. So it supported, among other activities, the advocacy for the implementation of the UN Universal Period Review recommendation to Vietnam concerning the abolition of censorship in the field of culture. So the recommendation was accepted, but unfortunately not implemented by Vietnam, which means that cultural actors need to ask authorization for any cultural event at least 3 weeks in advance. So what have we then learned from the initiative that the Commission has funded so far in the field? In addition to what I've already said, I would just like to highlight a few lessons learned, focusing on perhaps 3 aspects. Firstly, the importance of empowering artists to be vocal about rights. Secondly, the role of policies in all this. And thirdly, the role of partnerships. So our experience shows that the contribution of culture matters. It makes a difference when it comes, for instance, to promoting rights of minorities, such as LGBTQ+ communities, and to promote gender equality. For instance, in Bolivia with UNIC, we support alternative narratives about women and LGBTQ+ through a series of community-level initiatives, radio, TV, street arts, etc. And whereas the country has quite progressive legislation for women and LGBTQ+ groups, for instance, it's possible to change sex, it is still struggling with machismo and gender stereotypes and violence. But we have also learned that creators will discuss sensitive topics such as LGBTQ rights in their work because they care about it. So without being imposed by donors. And this is an approach that we very much promote in our 2016 policy framework. So cultural content can provoke change narratives about women and LGBTQ+ communities, as we've actually seen with the film Rafiki, for instance, that the EU supported through the ACP Culture Plus program. So the film, those of you who haven't seen it, it tells a love story between 2 Kenyan girls. And this actually caused a national debate in Kenya when it was temporarily prevented from being shown due to its depiction of homosexuality. So this story also shows that important topics like gender equality can go hand in hand with excellent artistic production, as the film was selected for the Cannes Film Festival. And I would like to underline that the EU never reserves the rights, for a final cut, but we leave really the artistic freedom to the artist and the beneficiaries of our projects. So a second lesson learned, it's about the role of policies and cultural policies in particular to give voice to minorities through culture. So a lot can be achieved by supporting creative actors to tell stories, minorities, and bring everything together. But to ensure freedom of expression in the long run, policies have to play a role to promote cultural diversity and artistic expression. So this is why, for instance, we are supporting the EU UNESCO expert facility that helps countries implement the 2005 convention. And through the work, we are supporting several countries to improve policies and frameworks. And one of them is in Mexico, which is one of the most diverse countries in the world, with more than 12 million indigenous people speaking 68 indigenous languages. And radio represents a prominent culture outlet to promote these languages, their identities and their stories. And the facility is now helping Mexico to improve the regulatory framework and to simplify access to licenses for indigenous and community radios, and to facilitate the incorporation of indigenous contents in media. As a final point and a final remark from my side, I think we can only promote cultural diversity, and by doing so promoting human rights and fundamental freedoms, if we do it with partners. So the examples that I shared earlier highlight contribution of international organizations like UNESCO that brings expertise and its convening power. But I really need to underline the contribution of local partners and civil society. Without them, our actions would not have made such an impact on people's lives. These partnerships are the best to tailor initiatives locally. These partners know the context. They have strong networks in cultural sectors and civil society in general, but also quite often among religious and traditional leaders. So it's very important in that regard also to stress the importance of working together as Europe in this field. We are united in diversity in the EU that recognizes the richness of EU's cultures and languages, and the fact that we are also stronger if we work together. So this is what makes the EU project so appealing to other countries and regions, that we manage to create good partnerships based, although we are different countries and we are preserving our national competences and differences. So this is what it forms the basis of what we now refer to as a Team Europe approach. A Team Europe approach that valorizes the strengths and expertise of each member state. And this approach will be our preferred way of working for the implementation of the EU's external assistance in the years to come. So I think this collaborative approach is even more required when we talk about cultural relations and cultural rights. And the EU member states cultural institutes and the EU, we have complementary expertise in artistic exchange, cultural cooperation, in sustainable development and policy dialogue. And last but not least, I think we have seen the benefits of this complementarity in the European Spaces of Culture projects that are discussed in this very conference. So let me stop myself here and thank you a lot for the attention.
Annica, thank you very much for giving us this overview of activities, of policies, and of programs and projects that you're running in relation to the field. Srirak, I will pass to you, and I just want to say that, you know, like Annica mentioned very often the word artistic freedom, no, as a sine qua non condition, let's say, for intercultural dialogue, for safe spaces. And I think that you're the best person to actually share with us some key insights into the topic, especially perhaps some insights from the most recent report on the state of artistic freedom that you are issuing annually. And yeah, I mean, your own experience and wish or understanding of how cultural relations can actually guarantee mutual learning, mutual listening, co-creation, equality of partnerships, and open spaces, safe spaces, as it was mentioned very often before, for full artistic freedom of expression. Do you mind unmuting? Please unmute yourself. And, yeah.
Thank you very much, Matina. First of all, it's a pleasure for me to be able to join this conference. I think it's very high time, and thanks for Unique for organizing these European Spaces for Culture. At the time when shrinking space, even on arts and culture, after the COVID-19 years last year, continued to this year, this is very much needed. I would address the questions of the panel discussion here broadly in two parts. I would say, first of all, I'd like to share some of the research findings when we monitor artistic freedom, as well as general human rights of the arts and culture sector overall, because all human rights are interconnected and we can't only look at artistic freedom as a standalone human rights. Artists will also need to associate, be able to get all the financial side. So it's a bit the full ecosystem, if you like, into the human rights of art and culture sector. So this is also the finding of monitoring censorship and other forms of restrictions of artistic freedom worldwide. I will also give a bit of a more picture on the Europe context in particular. And then the second part, I will just speak a bit about what can be done together with EU institutions and other arts and culture sectors. So just to
can I ask you maybe with the microphone? I don't know if you're touching your microphone by mistake. When you're speaking, there is a bit of interruption sometimes.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I touched my paper.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let me start by sharing some of the research findings that will give us, where things stand. In 2019, we monitor artistic freedom in Europe, roughly about 20 months in Europe. And when we published a report, which we launched the report in the European Parliament last year in January. And the second report I would highlight is our annual the State of Artistic Freedom report, which cover worldwide analysis of censorship that happen in many parts of the world. Let me start by sharing the global picture. Starting from overall restrictions, we have seen last year, even though it was a COVID-19 years, censorship and other form of restriction has increased rather than decreased, contrary to general perception that because a lot of shows has been cancelled during the lockdown, there shouldn't be too many censorship. And restrictions from our record show it's hit the highest since we documented. And many artists have been imprisoned, being sued and restricted. For example, artists being killed for expressing themselves increased from 9 to 17. That's almost double in 2020. Imprisonment of artists increased by 15% in 2020 compared to the previous years, from 71 to 82 cases. And these are artists who are imprisoned because of their free expression, not because of other criminal and wrongdoing, and we verify these cases. Prosecution of artists increased by almost 4-fold, from 23 to 107. And then worldwide, over 130 artists were being arbitrarily detained in 27 countries. So there was a bit of a daunting figures when we have seen something like this. Last year, visual artists are particularly vulnerable. Over 200 cases in 50 countries, and that's including imprisonment and prosecution that's been growing. Certainly COVID-19 were used as pretext for going after dissident artists also, especially those that has been criticized governments before the COVID-19. And then the COVID has been used as a pretext, very often in the name of disinformation. 65 artists we monitor will receive severe punishment related to COVID-19 simply for express themselves. And obviously last year was also a year where racial issues started in the US, has been going worldwide, and we've seen many of arts and culture sector has been restricted under those circumstances. Having a quick look at the Europe context, in particular, we've seen during the 20 months that we monitored, mentioned earlier, over 380 cases of censorship in 28 countries in Europe. That affects over 800 artists and artworks in this process. Music has been the type that's been affected the most at 39%, followed by visual arts 22%, theater 17%, and films 13%. The report also highlights 5 main issues that's affected both worldwide as well as in the European context. Very first one is there's been increasing use of counter-terrorism against artists. That means artists are being prosecuted for being terrorists simply because they are associate or their art form support particular incidents. In European context, a few countries still have criminal codes that prohibit glorifying terrorism. Now, the word glorifying terrorism have been used against a number of musicians, including rappers in many countries, when they sing songs and they are being sued for being seen as glorifying terrorism or insulting others, victims of terrorism. A second issue that's been highlighted in our report is the incidents that arts and culture artists and cultural workers doing their work and then being in trouble because they insult head of states or state symbols. And this has been analyzed and mentioned very often, that this is inconsistent with international human rights law. Head of states, governments are subject to scrutiny by the public, and they should not be overly protected, especially under the defamation law. And this has been a very major issue, especially when artists criticize governments. In European context, 19 countries still have these laws that protect head of states and state symbols. Of these, 13 are EU members. The third major issue we found is that arts and artistic freedom has been restricted because it seemed to hurt religious feelings. And now arts, free expression and protection of religious freedom, again, UN human rights experts as well as European human rights experts has mentioned that we cannot use freedom of religion to be the reason to restrict freedom of expression. They go hand in hand. And the very foundation of human rights is protect individual person, not ideology. And the growth of this fundamentalism, the use of anything that seems hurting religious and questioning head of religions or institution has brought many artists into trouble. In Europe, as well as many parts of the world, we also seen this fourth challenge where governments have applied undue influence into independent arts institutions. We have seen growth of right-wing governments in many parts of the world where the head of independent museum or public museum has been sacked, and then their own people coming in. Some of the grants making has been linked to nationalism, that it has to support nationalism narratives. Otherwise, the opportunity to get funding has been restricted. So these are some of the challenges we're facing. And obviously LGBT, as Annica mentioned, I think that's one, and this happened both in Europe and outside. We monitor the increase or emerging trends of the use of the so-called propaganda law in the arts and culture, meaning anything that refer or related to LGBT expression has been restricted on the ground of a threat to family values or for the health of the minors. Anything expressions, any scenes of men kissing men or women kissing women on any art form has been taken out or censored. We also launched a report on LGBT artistic expression in collaboration with City of Krakow last year to show the patterns of how LGBT artists and cultural workers have suffered from different forms of discrimination, from very blatant attack into a more subtle, both in European and the external. There's also challenges when it comes to censorship online through social media, which use community standards, which is de facto is the criteria for censorship, which is what is allowed, what is not allowed. Women nipples, for example, is being banned. And the question that we're asking is why not social media use international human rights standards rather than arbitrarily each company assign their own standards into what is acceptable and not acceptable. Many artwork and art courses have been removed from social media simply because it shows some nudity in it. Now, coming just the last few minutes on what can be done, and my very main flag is to adopt a human rights-based cultural policy. And for institution, arts organization, as the UN rapporteurs on cultural rights said very often, don't just say we work in the cultural sector, say we work in the cultural rights sector. because human rights enabling the right holders and also apply various standards. And let me give you some example. By using human rights language, it refers to international human rights standards, which guaranteed individual artists and expressions already. So there's standards already. We don't have to recreate that. There's international human rights law we can tap into. Secondly, human rights means equality and non-discrimination. This will enabling us to have a look at which voices are underrepresented in the art and culture sector, who are the ones who's being unheard, what is the mainstream in arts and dominate arts and culture scene. And for EU institutions, for example, to focus and support more of those that's being underrepresented or being discriminated very clearly or very subtly. But for us to know this, we need to do some human rights analysis. Organizations like Freemuse and others have done some of this already to see the patterns of discrimination or marginalize some of the groups. Take gender aspects, for example. Street arts are being seen and taught and practiced as belong to men. For women artists, this has been extremely difficult because as artists themselves say, streets belong to men, make it very difficult. Women artists find it extremely difficult to access to fellowship and training, which basically will get them into a career movement. And this has been dominated by men in particular, in art school opportunity. Music festival, another example, 80% of most art in the Scandinavian, the main musicians that take the main stage on music festival, 80% were men, and women were strongly underrepresented. Also, human rights cultural policy means participation, that artists should be able to discuss, have their common challenges discussed. For Freemuse, we coordinate Artistic Freedom Coalition, Brussels-based, of 26 organizations come together quarterly, roughly, and then discuss what are some of the common challenges facing by artists in Hungary, in Poland, in other countries, where there's a different ways of restrictions. So these will be an important part that we have to also support. At the moment, the group doesn't quite have funding to come and sit together. And also the national level where artists can come together and discuss their common challenges, opportunity to engage with the EU and international audience. So the importance of forming, supporting local action network for free expressions is very badly needed. Freemuse, we generate and help facilitate the global action network for artistic freedom and bring arts and culture, IETM, for example, on performing arts, International Music Council, European Music Council, come together and really advocate together and make our voice heard. For this, we need also some support to make this go. And my last point is just to point to the importance of individual person to make a difference. That in the arts and culture sector, we work on arts and creativity. We can always use arts and creativity to change the world for the better. For this, Freemuse also join. It's great to hear some of the wonderful projects that Annica mentioned. We do similar work in the name of Small Change Project, and that's everyone. We make an announcement, anyone who can believe they can change the world within 6 months and under 1,000 euros can write to us and we can talk about it, and whether we can support those, and that will grow creativity. We started in 3 countries in the Middle East, but looking at expanding this also. So for each of the 3 countries in the Middle East, in Jordan, Lebanon, and Tunisia. But we're looking at replicating this and do it in many parts of the world. So those are some of the small steps that we can use, but the main one is really to adopt a human rights-based approach to cultural policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Srirak, for revealing so much information also about the state of artistic freedom. I think some of the information that you shared with us is quite striking. Also the element of the COVID and how this has impacted. And of course, we gather, your plea for a human rights cultural policy, which I think is important also in the conversation that we're having in relation to cultural relations as well. And having artistic freedom as a precondition, let's say, for equality of partnerships, for human rights, for equality of opportunities, Yeah, thank you very much. Ayoko, passing from policy level, from advocacy level, let's go to the level of cultural practitioners, of institutions, cultural organizations that are working on the ground, that are in contact with different communities, different audiences. Like, how do you, from your experience, from your reality, how do you see that cultural relations can help to strengthen freedom of expression and cultural rights, but also allowing to better understand the difference of contexts and stakes of each partner or community where projects or activities or initiatives are taking place?
Thank you, Matina. Thank you, Srirak, yes, for your presentation. Yes, I would like to thank also Unique, of course, for inviting me to participate in this conference and panel. First of all, maybe I would like to explain the point of view from which I am speaking. I am Togolese and French, and before being an arts programmer at BOZAR, the Center for Fine Arts in Brussels, I was a cultural journalist, specializing in the contemporary art scenes in Africa and its diasporas. So I traveled across the African continent for more than 20 years to meet artists and cultural operators living on the continent and involved in international cultural projects. So it's really from this perspective that I am speaking from also, yes, a kind of ground perspective. And this experience allowed me to develop a particular expertise on the cultural sector in Africa. This experience was further complemented when I worked for the ACP Culture Plus program, an ambitious program of support to the cultural sectors from Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific, funded by the European Union and implemented by the ACP group of states. This is why I'm particularly interested in the European Spaces of Culture program, and I'm happy to participate, yes, in this conference, and also to really discover all these great projects, the 6 projects that were presented. As you understand, so my expertise is really focused on Africa, but I hope that the points I'm going to raise will resonate more widely for the EU external cultural relations. I think it's important to remember that cultural relations do not necessarily create safe spaces in which a freedom of expression can take place. The power imbalance in cultural projects and relations between European and African actors, for example, is nothing new. This is why a program such as European Spaces of Culture is important, because it has recognized this difficulty and is seeking new methodologies to overcome it. The six projects that were presented were very exciting. And I have to say that I would have liked to be able to exchange more also with the local partners in each countries. Regarding the freedom of expression and the human rights, if we recognize the power imbalance first and foremost, and especially for the partner and institutions in a position of power, the importance of a long-lasting of listening and learning is I think really crucial. Because what does freedom of expression mean in Benin, in Ethiopia, in the USA, in Belgium, or in Mongolia? There are, of course, common elements, but there are also a lot of differences due to political and socio-cultural contexts. Certainly, projects such as those of European Spaces of Culture can help to strengthen freedom of expression in the countries where the projects are implemented. But freedom of expression is also an internal value that must prevail among the partners and therefore implies their capacity to formulate and listen to criticism. I think it is essential. The projects and the cultural relations we are talking about are very sensitive. They do not develop outside the relations of power that structure international relations. This is why it seems to me that the first work to be done may be an internal work between partners, a work of listening, trust, respect, acceptance of criticism from both sides, and ensure the construction of an internal freedom of expression that is sometimes lacking within international cultural projects. But this takes time and requires a lot of commitment and humility. It seems to me that this internal freedom of expression, which could manifest itself in the sharing of a critical analysis of the projects, is essential not only for the success and the positive impact of the projects, but also for their sustainability and their contribution of a better intercultural dialogue. We all know that collaborating with people who do not have the same culture as us is not easy, not simple, and sometimes even very complicated. So it would be interesting to value and discuss these critical points, as well as the positive points and the successes of the projects. In this perspective, I would like to highlight and to thank all the initiatives that aim to promote these new methodologies. I am thinking in particular of the Toolkit for Fair Collaboration in Cultural Relations produced by UNIC and a team of experts, including you, Matina. Or I'm thinking also of the new Toolkit for Fairer International Collaborations in the Arts, published by EITM, the EITM network, and written by Mark van Graan. A lot needs to be done still in this internal field, but I am very confident, and I see the development of all these initiatives with great interest. I think European Spaces of Culture program can be the good framework to continue to strengthen freedom of expression and cultural rights in different countries, but also to continue to build the new internal methodologies needed in these international cultural projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ayoko. You are putting the bar very high for the work that we are doing, but it's true. And I like what you're saying, you know, like these new internal methodologies, because it's also like how practitioners, how institutions, how different stakeholders actually work together and how they can guarantee this symmetry, let's say, in
exactly,
in
more horizontal, exactly,
yes.
Also relationships.
Yeah. So thank you very much for your intervention. And I think that it's very important also to listen from the real artists, like from the people that are, you know, like we were discussing about artistic freedom, we were discussing about cultural collaborations. Venuri has had the experience also working in the Colombo-scope project that was part of the European Spaces of Culture. And it would be very enlightening also to get your own view, your own experience from this practice, like, and from your practice, and how those international partnerships benefit your practice in reality. And it's not, you know, like just policy words or wishful thinking, no, like, but how are you experiencing this this context of work?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on this panel, and thank you so much, Ayoko, for saying what has to be said, and also Srirak for this statistics that I was really, it's shocking, and really that we all need to be aware about. But yes, this equal, this, just to say about your point, this equal collaborations is something that we've been really insisting on also, because this older model of, you know, Europe coming with the experts and creating things that are for an audience that is somewhere else doesn't really, you know, how do we move forward with that? And I must say that the conversations back home with the Goethe Institute especially has been quite fruitful in a way that they have been listening to us and giving us the space to, like, allowing us to say what we need and try out the things that we need, and giving that space for us in many ways. But we also we are like eternally being wary, because we need the funding and the support, because our government doesn't give that, especially for the kind of work that we do. And then how do we use it strategically as artists as well? We need to be strategic, and also how to give access and you know, like to spread the access, because I myself, I already am coming from a position, I am aware of privilege in my country. I speak English, I'm from the city, I am a woman, but still I have the possibility to have equal conversations with the partners. But then also in terms of listening to the voices, as you know, Gayatri Spivak says, who is a subaltern and how do we listen to the subaltern speak? How can we then also allow to create spaces and continue and, you know, use the resources to allow maybe artists who are not in that space to also be able to make their own work and speak their own things, is also something that has been a very big preoccupation for me and what I've been trying to do in the last years. So I just wanted to say that. But as I had been asked also to share a little bit of my practice, and I thought maybe I'll show some photographs a little bit just to have a context of where I'm coming from. It'll be a little bit ad hoc, but I'll share some pictures. Share screen, let me try. Okay. Do you see something?
Yes, it's working. Thank you.
Okay, great. So basically I work mostly a lot of my work has been working with my own body as a solo artist, but also collaborating with poets and visual artists and things like that. And I come from a dance and choreography background, but I work in the spaces of ritual as well as performance art, and recently mostly in public spaces as well. As Srirak was saying, it's not easy for women to be in public. My recent work has also been about looking at anonymity and how we can actually, having the power to choose to be anonymous can allow for us to access and be in spaces and also return the gaze, the male gaze, in a way that we were not able to do before. So this is one work that started in a gallery space, and then I started doing things, going out into the streets with women in the evening, or doing little dance performances in the streets to kind of to claim the spaces also of the beach. This is another kind of situation where women from our country, fully dressed, have to go to bathe. But I personally, you know, love the feeling of water on my skin. And for many years, we have been having to wear layers and layers of clothing. So I kind of, you know, allow myself to be in a sari, which is supposed to be the respectable outfit for women. If you're wearing a sari, you're a respectable woman, but it also can be a sensual kind of material. So wearing this and going out into public spaces, and then going into stripping into something but still not being seen, and also the discourse on how European women are viewed in our country is also another complex thing. But then also being anonymous allows also me to then go and participate in activism, covering my gender, my class, and all of these things, and to be able to, and also then in this space, I was able to speak to people who we may not speak to because of our class differences and things like that, you know. So also working with a group of women and men to be in the Independence Square, again with our faces covered. So this was a series that I called the Roadside Ninja series, which grew over a period of 2 years, which started as a woman to reclaim space. And then with the COVID, with the Easter attacks in 2019, it became, the face cover became banned, and the anti-Muslim kind of sentiment really came to the surface. And so we were not able to continue it, and it would be ridiculous to kind of continue to make this kind of art. And then during COVID, we all became with our face covered, and the same spaces that banned the face cover now made it compulsory. And then we went out into the streets with groups to kind of find how can we create connection in this space where we are all anonymous. So the same kind of face mark evolved into becoming different things over the years. So that's just one example. This is a piece called Directorate. Sorry for this image, but it's come somewhere in the middle of the piece, where I was also working with who is the traitor, who is the patriot, and this manipulation of this dialogue and rhetoric. And also, for me, patriarchy and patriotism and violent nationalism is all on the same same. It has the same commonalities. And I was. This was performed in the Colombo dance platform, which is sponsored by the Goethe Institute. And so the Goethe Institute also, in partnership, we've been able to create these spaces for small works, experimental works, intimate works, political works that could be shown without having to go through the government censor board, especially because we also during this time and again now we have to, if there's a public performance, we do have to give our script to the censor board. And so then what we realize is through dance, when you don't have to use text, you can subvert these existing kind of censorship and be able to create some to kind of present the work and start talking about something. But also, so because also with the Goethe Institute sponsorship, then we don't have to sell tickets, and then we can do it in small spaces that allows for this kind of a thing to happen. And this was because we're talking about Colombo-scope. This was a piece that was an opening of Colombo-scope 2015. It was a kind of famed on a ritual practice. Women are not allowed to be in the ritual practice in Sri Lanka. We're not allowed to enter the sacred space. So I had to take the existing rituals and subvert it. And also I was because ritual is also used as an exorcism of certain mental illness and community gathering. That's what it used to happen those days. So now what I was looking at during this time, there was a Buddhist monk-led violence against the Muslim minority community, similar to what was happening in Myanmar. And the Buddhist monks have a lot of power in Sri Lanka, and also government support, not overtly, but covert government support. And we were not able to, a lot of us were not really saying much. And so I was able to use the the Colombo-scope platform to create this ritual to address this madness that I felt was taking over as this violence against the Muslim minority community. And the good thing was nobody asked me what I was going to do. Nobody knew what I was going to do till the opening performance. And so that kind of trust and safe space to be able to try to work on something. And then the collaborators who I work with, a poet and a drummer, we were also questioning, is it okay to talk about this now? But we did feel safe because we were using text. The ritual uses text and subverts text, and we comment on the president and the people in power. And also society, the silence of the society right now. But we were able to kind of perform this because we didn't have to say what we were doing. It was kind of a opening folk piece or something like this, and people probably expected some beautiful dance or something, and that didn't happen. But so I think these are really, really important for these kind of things to happen, But of course, we can also question: are we speaking to the, are we speaking to the converted already? Like, who is really in these spaces? Are we really accessing the people who need to hear what we are saying? So those are also things that we can kind of question in terms of where we are doing these things. But once we developed and we were commissioned to make this work, I was able to then, in 2018, when the parliamentary coup happened, we were able to redo the performance and do it in a public space by changing the dialogue for what was happening now and comment on the madness that was happening now. I won't go too much into the political context now, because you can read up about that, or maybe you know about that. Then this is another work that I did for the recent Colombo-scope, which curated by Natasha, where I was working in kind of researching and working in the dance bars in Sri Lanka as an exotic dancer for men. And this is not something that someone of my class does, and it's not something that is considered safe, but I was interested as an artist to kind of be in these spaces and see what was happening. And because the Colombo-scope and Natasha was able to commission the work, we were able to then present it in a space which is not a theater space, a kind of a nightclub, which is in the Grand Oriental Hotel, which has also like post-colonial kind of history and is near the harbor. And we were able to create this kind of performance, which may not have been possible in another space, and also I was able to work with a group of women who, after being a part of this project, was also, we were started to talk about our sensuality and kind of how do we empower and take on our sensuality, because there's a lot of, in our Buddhist culture and middle class culture, we are which is also, I would say, it's coming from Victorian colonized, left over from this period, that we have a lot of, we're supposed to be modest, cover ourselves, we are not sensual or sexual beings, and how to find these kind of performance to even address this kind of agency. So this was a kind of a participatory 4-hour-long performance.
Yeah, we'll ask you to wrap up so that we can also have some conversation.
Yes, sure. And here I'm just sharing something which is couple of pieces that I made about the passport blessing ceremony, which is also because talking about access. It's important that we have access, but also when we're talking about these collaborations and international collaborations, that a lot of us are not starting from an equal place. We don't have equal passports and we are not able to travel in the same way. And now I think with COVID, a lot of us have been restricted, but we have been restricted for many, many years. And so I think that when I'm really glad to hear that you are all addressing these kind of things as well. How do we then allow real equality when it comes to partnerships internationally? And the good thing has been that meeting artists in these process of Colombo Dance Platform, Colombo Scope, and other places, and with the Goethe Institute, been able to collaborate and continue friendships. Like this piece is a piece I did with Jamaican artist Wasim Clark, and we talked about our complicity and our heritage of a colonial heritage, which is this widespread project, and we were able to make a film and show this work. So there are a lot of things that we can do to subvert these things and use these things in a good way. And I think that I'm glad to hear that you're thinking of partnering and finding other ways to, distill the hierarchies really question how this can be done. Sorry, I hope that I made sense. Thank you very much.
It made sense. It absolutely made sense. And it's very beautiful also to see, like how the project unfolded and also your last comment about what future projects can be born from this international collaboration and these international encounters. I think that we had a very insightful moment, let's say, to discuss different things from different levels, like starting from the policy, talking from the EU point of view, the different frameworks, the policy documents, the international organization connections, EU, UNESCO, the projects that you're implementing on the ground, which is also very important and are challenging a bit different preconceptions or different ideas that we might have. And it's great to see, the EU underlining this role that culture could have in conflict settings, in complex settings. So this is very welcome. And it was very important also to hear from the advocacy point of view, understand a bit what has been the reality, let's say, of artistic expression and freedom of artistic expression during the last years. As it was said before, underlining this need for a human rights cultural policy, I think it's very important. And then thank you, Ayoko, also for, mentioning all these really insightful thought about how can we guarantee that those cultural relations are symmetrical, are fair, are challenging how we have learned to work so far, and how we can reinvent those internal methodologies to make things more impactful and meaningful as well. And then also Venuri, of course, talking about how you have experienced on the ground these collaborations, how those projects gave you the freedom and the space to actually express and bring all these elements and all this research, this artistic research that you were doing to the forefront, I think was very important. We have some time perhaps for questions among yourselves. I don't know if you want to ask something your colleagues, that you bring experiences from different angles. I think that could be a good moment. And yeah, I don't know if somebody has a question. Yes, Annica.
Yes, thank you, and thank you to the fellow panelists. It's been very interesting to hear your perspectives, and I just wanted to start by reacting to something what Srirak was saying. So I have one question and perhaps two comments. First of all, like all of you probably was a bit shocked by hearing the increase of challenges that artists have been facing during COVID when it comes to persecution and being retained for all sorts of excuses. And I would like to ask you why do you think this is the case? Is it because human rights are less respected, or is it because we have found or artists have found more virtual ways of sharing their their opinions, and thereby perhaps reaching even a larger audience. I would be very interested in hearing your views on that. And secondly, on your point on cultural rights, I mean, we couldn't agree with you more. We always take a rights-based approach at the EU when designing our programs, and I would just like to underline that we have a specific program for human rights, including cultural rights and cultural rights defenders. I think since 2014 we have supported 45,000 individuals, and in 2020 we have committed over 2 billion euros for the purpose. But of course there is always more to do. And the second comment is about the challenge of gender, and I think this is something that we're all very much recognizing and see that culture can actually contribute to gender equality, and just not just giving access to culture, but actually help women develop their careers in culture and creative industries. And we have several programs ongoing. We are working with the ITC, for instance, to develop designers, to bring local designers to international tastes and international markets, and also through the ACP culture program we are also trying to promote women directors, etc., and to follow their sort of career progress. So very much looking forward to your comments. Thanks.
Shall I come in? Yeah, thank you very much, Annica, for the questions and comments. Let me just address the point of why the increase, and also invite other panelists to join in on other comments, especially on the gender side. I think the incidence of increased number of last year can be explained at various levels. I mean, on the one hand, the world has been growing divisive. And that's, put it very bluntly, the last few years, from the US politics, the movement. And this is not only in the US, the growth of nationalism, but then the very function of the growth of nationalism is that it's built on the ideas of the majority and then the minority. So the very notion, the very foundation of nationalistic politics is you try to please the majority of the people so you can win the vote, very often at the cost of hurting minorities' voices. But then you feel like it's okay to silence those minority voices because you get the majority, so you keep you winning the vote, keep you in power. And in Europe, at least 14 countries, this is according to the BBC, at least 14 countries, political parties, right-wing political parties, have gained more seats in the past few years. And that's quite daunting, and you get to see more right-wing movement gaining seats in countries like Sweden or other countries, you name it. So growth of nationalism and how the idea of us and them, and it's okay, the new legitimacy created by Trump and still spin on to Europe is that there's legitimacy to silence minority voices. And once the leaders say things or put on Twitter, kind of belittle or marginalize minority voice with little protection, and that creates some white space. So growth of populism, nationalism is one of them. Secondly, I would say now that a number of think tank organizations has identified that last year there's been increasing number of protests worldwide. So we've seen protests we haven't seen before. As another phenomenon has been, most of political parties in power has shifted their policy toward the right, both politically and economically. And there's very few major political parties, whether this is in Turkey or in the US, where the conservatives shift radically to the right. Whether this is all the same in Austria, in Turkey, and a number of other countries, where just the policy that please people. And then thirdly, we put also the explanation in various reports that the traditional regimes or authoritarian regimes hasn't changed very much. Those countries under dictators, for example, remain the same practice with little evidence of improvement. But yet in Europe and North America, things are getting worse because of this nationalism and populism. So say Russia, Turkey, Egypt stay pretty much status quo. And then Europe, the Western Europe, North America were going down in 2020. And that's make the numbers going wide. And then another, the fourth explanation of this is whenever there's a social phenomenon happen, government tend to use them to go after the opposing voice that happened before. So use that as a pretext. So COVID-19 was just one of them. Then when artists criticized, especially cartoonists last year, many cartoonists will end up in jail. Basically, they question lockdown policy, they questions whether the lockdown was soon enough or it's been too long. Everyone has the right to say what they think, but they also should be able to do it peacefully and being respected. Most of the artists who were in different kind of troubles were partly because they criticized and opposed government policy. And I think those are some of the factors that would explain the increased number of these. On the gender side, certainly I think this is a long way to go. When we publish Women and the Right to Create report, and that was recognized as a good practice by the UN rapporteurs on cultural rights when she submitted the 10th anniversary report to the Human Rights Council. We found that in the arts and culture sector, there's a systemic structure that marginalize artists, that make it extremely hard for women artists to make progress in their career, starting from training school, from art college, going all the way to become a successful artist. You face various obstacles along the way. And as a result, there's very few small percentage of women artists have done successful in their career because of that patriarchal society, the structure, and not only, and this become institutionalized in many, from the arts institution, the choice people make, who to pick to get to do the show, all of this has been extremely difficult. And also I think on the LGBT, we need another hour to discuss about some of these issues. It's just so widespread and so systematic that you don't see it on the day-to-day basis. You don't pick it up when you read newspapers, but once you really look closely, you see patterns and you see institutionalization of that make that continue to exist.
Well, that's important. And thanks for asking also, Annica. It was very important to listen back. Do we have any questions, or is maybe somebody from the audience want to ask something? I mean, I know that we're getting some good comments about the content of this panel and the conversations that we're having, but if there are any questions, now might be the moment for this. No? So if no questions, then maybe perhaps because we are going to be heading slowly towards closing this panel, I would like maybe some closing words from each one of you, perhaps, like a small reflection of what you've heard so far, and maybe some few hints and ideas about a possible roadmap for the future that we can take along. That would be helpful, perhaps, and inspiring as well. Who would like to start? Ayoko, you're smiling. Yeah? Don't mind, unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Matina, and really thank you all, yes, for your presentation. It was very, very inspiring. Just a few words is just to say that I think really this program of the houses, the European Spaces for Culture, is very a lot of very promising, and we hope to see really the continuation of this project. You know, it was really kind of the closing conference, but I think it's really important to continue to follow the project, you know, after after the program, and to see really the impacts, maybe also to give more voices and more spaces to the local partners, very important. And also maybe one recommendation more is to also try to build bridges between the different programs led by the EU, you know, in the field of cultural relations and yes, because there's several programs and sometimes it's a bit difficult. Mrs. Floren, Annica, you told about yes, the great project Culture at Work Africa. I know a bit of this project because BOZAR is one of the partner, and so also yes, I would like to just say that there's an exhibition actually that has opened. It's an online exhibition, so I will share the link in the chat. Maybe the attendees want to see it. It's very interesting because you can discover really the 33 projects funded by the Culture at Work program, and there will be also a panel organized by BOZAR on the 17th of June on you know, yes, also, you know, different project and the aims of this program. So I share the link, and thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you, Ayoko. Venuri?
Yeah, I think it's this thing that I think it's always already been said, that it's just super important that to hear that this is, because I'm not really familiar, I wasn't very familiar about what is going on with the UNIC and everything, but to understand that you're coming together, because it's also when we don't have the spaces and the funding from our own local bodies and governments, that when you all come together, then there's no one kind of interest that gets imposed on us, and then it's really about what we need and what the artists need, and to really listen and to have these continue to have the partnerships from the local from the ground, and to see what they need, and to then allow also, because we were talking about also diaspora communities who are in Europe, and this is a really nice way that we've also been working in how to connect with the diaspora, to bring them back or to start conversations, because when you say they are living in Europe or they've had to go to Europe for many reasons, these are also nice ways to kind of to continue such conversations. So
to promote intercultural dialogue on different geographies. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Srirak?
Thank
you. Unmute yourself, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just briefly, I think maybe on two last points I would add. I think first one is maybe for the EU, different agencies in particular, I think especially as a host, it's a real pleasure to hear Annica from the DG and the program that you're doing. We were not aware or fully aware of the level of the work that's being done. So I think that's really deserve a good praise and really continue on that path. You know, we had some impression because when we contact Creative Europe, for example, trying to get funding for the coalition for artistic freedom, which is then we basically were told that there was no funding for artistic freedom. There's only for individual arts projects. So especially now the EU has passed the economic recovery for culture, the resolution from the European Parliament coming out in September last year, which has mentioned all of the potential support and not only the funding, I think making those platforms available for artists to come together and discuss. Let me just throw one example. When we organized a meeting with Hungarian artists last year, we invited about 15 prominent artists in the countries to come together, and Freemuse would like to learn about what kinds of some common challenges Hungarian artists are facing. And the number one issue they said, and I think there's generally consensus, was the funding mechanism that has made it very difficult for artists. And all of a sudden, there's one criteria being added, that the narrative have to support nationalism, national heroes, or something along that line has become a criteria. And this is a one way of really, selecting what narrative is accepted and what's not in a country. And that has been their #1 concern on the mechanism for funding at the national level. So our response was, we need to really come together, whether you're in Sri Lanka, in wherever the countries you are, to form a group of a network of artists. And we generally call Global Action Network, to really monitor what's going on in the country, share whatever happened with us. If there's censorship happened, there's a new law being passed. In Indonesia, for example, last year, all the music and songs have to get government approval before you can go to the studio recording. That law didn't get passed because civil society and arts organization challenged that law, international, nationally. That's just one example of how working together as a building network can really overturn something like this. But then we have a bit more bad case, because in Cuba, that law got passed. And now, whatever you need to do as an artist, you need government stamp of approval first before you can actually put together as a show. It still happened today in Cuba. It's being safe in Indonesia, but in other countries. So that's the importance of building, working together as a coalition. And I think the EU has a big role to play, not only provide funding, but also create platforms, make artists' voice heard. So I think those are some of the things that artists and institutions can do together.
It brings us to your last slide, no, Annica, of your presentation regarding the power of partnerships. Perhaps one closing word from yourself, because we need to close this panel.
Yeah, no, just a few words. I think there's a lot of good food for thought that I'm bringing back to the office, and notably what the point that Ayoko made, that it's not because you're managing cultural relations and funding projects that you necessarily have that safe space and the listening and mutual understanding in place. So really important to make sure that there is sufficient time for that sort of dialogue, and also for Venuri for really showing the creativity of an artist, finding ways to, despite all the rules and censorships in place, to find a way to express a view or illustrate something that is important. And also the need to perhaps move both from cultural spaces, but also to more public ones, so that you really reach the people on the street, the common people, and not just those that normally come to cultural spaces. And also for Srirak to point to the fact that even though we are working and we are an international corporation, we have some lessons to learn at home also. He's pointed to many of the challenges that we've seen in the EU countries that we believe are democratic, open and respectful societies. So thanks a lot to UNIC for making space for this dialogue. It's been very interesting. So thanks a lot.
Thank you to UNIC. Thank you to all. Very important and very interesting conversation. There is a small break right now, so we invite you also, before going to the plenary room, you'll have the opportunity to watch a film made by the team of BOZAR, Eco Art Festival, which was one of the pilot projects from the European Spaces of Culture in Mongolia. And afterwards, there will be the final session of today's conference with a keynote from Stefano Sannino, Secretary-General of the European External Action Service, who will offer thoughts on the role of the role of culture in EU's activity on the global political stage. And he will be followed by a discussion with EU Parliament member Salima Yenbu, cultural policy expert Kimani Ngogo, joining from Kenya, curator and cultural critic Katerina Botanova, and UNIC director Gite Schwartz. Thank you very much to all, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.